God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the I Don't Belong Here show, and I am your host, Samantha Benigno. I am a behavioral scientist, a career psychotherapist, a sixth-year PhD candidate, and a master's level psychologist, and I am here breaking down the Karen Read case. Now, I'm sure some of you have seen this. This is wild stuff. With some of the people who believe that Karen Read is guilty and are, big advocates against Karen Read, who think that anybody who supports her is crazy, we believe in aliens, we're a mob, whatever. Some of them I just have to believe are doing it for negative attention because it's a hot topic and it's a way to maybe stand out against the crowd, I guess. I mean, that's what it seems like to me. It seems to me like some of these people are just doing it for the negative attention because they realize that, if they're a part of the group and if they support Karen, then they're not any different than anybody else. And why would we care, right? Because all of us feel that way. So I have to believe that Wendy Murphy doesn't actually believe what she's putting on her X account. I can't believe that anyone thinks this is true. And I'm sure some people are much more familiar with her than I am. From what I can extrapolate just from listening to Turtle Boy and, whoever, some people who have mentioned her on different shows, I guess she's been a long-standing anti-Karen Read person. I don't know. Obviously, she is a lawyer in and around Boston, from what I can tell. I don't know. All I know is this theory, it cannot possibly be what the Commonwealth is trying to say happened. It just can't. Okay. So, but we're going to go through it because somebody put it out there as though this is the truth and is claiming that this, I'm going to give this a direct quote, this is the step-by-step explanation of how Karen Read killed John O'Keefe. This is so absurd, you guys. But you know what? I don't want to spoil the surprise. So we're going to take a look at it together. We're going to go through it line by line, and you tell me what you think. Let's get started. We're going to take a look at who this Wendy Murphy person is. And I think it's really interesting when you look at her background that she would be taking such an aggressive position against Karen Read. So let's take a look.
How did you get involved in this particular area of the law? Tell me what guided you in this direction.
I was prosecutor, pretty routinely criticizing judges for how they were treating abused women and children, in the sense that they were ordering them to do things that they weren't ordering robbery victims to do. Most significantly, they were ordering them to turn over years' worth of counseling records, pediatric records, school records, even though they weren't relevant and significantly predated the crime. And I just kept criticizing the court for treating these victims differently than other victims of other kinds of crimes. And it was irrational to me. And one day a judge said to me, he pulled his glasses down from his nose and said, "Ms. Murphy, you are the government. Your job is to state the law, not complain about it. If you want to change the law, you have to get a different job." And I guess that was the inspiration, because I thought, wow, I'm the prosecutor. I think it's my job to stand up for victims when they're being mistreated. But this judge has just told me that's not my job. So I do need to get a different job. And I literally left the DA's office as a prosecutor later that year and started doing pro bono work for victims, figuring this was a missing voice, if you will, in the system, and that they needed to be heard. They needed to be in that courtroom objecting and saying, "You're not treating me fairly. It's not right for you to treat me because I'm a woman or a child differently than you're treating the victim of a robbery or the eyewitness to a carjacking.
So that's interesting. She is, considers herself obviously a victim advocate and someone who stands up for truth and justice and for women being treated fairly. And on the other hand, has just put forth the most absurd theory for what happened to John O'Keefe that I could possibly come up with, that anyone could possibly come up with. So that's Wendy Murphy. Let's take a closer look at her theory. Here it is. We ready? The moment we have all been waiting for since we all first heard about this case, the play-by-play of exactly how Karen Read killed John O'Keefe. Here we go. As per Wendy Murphy's X account. So, step by step, what really happened? Okay. Karen Read and John O'Keefe each left the bar with a cocktail. Now that's important, everybody. They got into Karen's car and drove to 34 Fairview, but Karen didn't want to go to the party. They had a fight about it because John didn't want to ask his buddies to drive him home. Okay. Now, that makes absolutely no sense because here's what we know from a long time ago, what we've known forever, really, about that night. First of all, they were getting along. Karen really wanted to go back to Chris Albert's to make pizzas or something and was kind of insistent about doing that. Obviously, the Alberts were going back to the house. They were trying to get there by midnight because Brian Albert Jr.'s birthday was going to be turning on January 29th at midnight. That's, why I guess the bar was closing anyway, but that is part of what the urgency was to get back to the house and why they weren't going to go to the pizza place. So the idea that, they had a big fight and Karen wasn't going to drive him, to me, there's been no indication at any point, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, somebody, there's been no indication at any point of them separating. And in fact, and we all know this, at one point, you'll remember that Jen McCabe, as they're walking out, tries to get Karen to go with her to leave John, and she refuses to do it. And that's something that we heard Jen McCabe say on the stand in her testimony, that yes, she asked Karen if she would come with her. And remember, there's that whole exchange where Alan Jackson tries to make it sound like it was intentional, like she was maliciously intending to get her away from John. Jen says that she wasn't, but so we know for sure that Karen didn't want to leave John. There was no intention of them splitting to go two different ways. Right? So this first, number one, the very first thing that we are reading, Karen and John each left the bar with a cocktail. They got into Karen's car, drove to 34 Fairview, but Karen didn't want to go to the party. They had a fight about it because John didn't want to ask his buddies to drive him home. That didn't happen. We already know that didn't happen. Okay. There was no discussion about them splitting and John not wanting to get people to drive him home. So I don't know what this is about. If anything, they got a little bit lost on the way, right? They didn't have the right instructions. Karen misses their turn, whatever. So it didn't appear that there was enough time for a fight. So this idea that they got into some big fight from the time that they left the waterfall and then got to 34 Fairview, that was like a 7-minute period of time. Like there's just no way they could have gotten into a huge brawl in 7 minutes. It's just not possible, right? There's only so much fighting you can do. And if they had gotten into a huge fight, the chances are good that they would have continued to fight. Even if they were still in at 34 Fairview sitting in the car, that would have continued because, if you've ever been in the middle of a lover's quarrel, or a big one, it doesn't end so easily, right? You want to try to resolve it. And Karen is not someone, as we now all very well know, who lets things go easily. She called John 55 times, called, not text, called 55 times from the time that she dropped him off at 34 Fairview to when they found him the next morning at like 6:08 or 6:07. So we know that Karen isn't going to get into a fight and then just let him walk out of the car. That's not happening. So, okay, this is just nonsense. There's no other way to say it. It's nonsense. Okay, so number 2, when they pulled up, 34 Fairview was on the right passenger side. Okay, yep, nobody's arguing it wasn't. John got out with his cocktail in his right hand. He kept the door open and continued pressing her to come in. This is when a witness drove by and saw the interior light was on and only one person was in the car because John was hiding on the outside passenger door, cajoling Karen to come into the house. Right. Because nobody would have seen, the 6'3", 215-pound man that was standing next to the car. And Karen, by the way, in all of those eyewitness reports, was looking down like at her phone. So wouldn't the car door have been open and she have been focused on John if that was the case? And now remember something else about this night. Karen was waiting for John to tell her whether to come in or not. So she was actually waiting to hear back from John. That's why she was outside the house. She was never going to just drop him off until she sat there for 10 minutes or whatever, and she didn't hear back. So then she got upset, and took off. So this idea that nope, nobody saw him, nobody saw Karen motioning that she was talking to somebody. So, but yep, we're just inventing a whole scenario now with John. The car door is open and John is standing there, even though the witnesses saw just a woman and saw her looking straight ahead, right? Or on her phone. Okay, number 3. When Karen again refused to go in, John, this is great. Oh my God, you guys, what is going on? Okay, when Karen again refused to go in, John grabbed her cocktail from the center console with his left hand to pressure her even more because he knew she was a drunk. At least we know Wendy's a classy person. All right, so when Karen Reed again refused to go in, John grabbed her cocktail from the center console with his left hand to pressure her even more because he knew she was a drunk and would want her cocktail. He now had a glass in each hand. So John is now outside of the car, double-fisted, trying to get Karen to come into the house. Okay? Double-fisted. Karen persisted in her refusal and began to slowly drive away to taunt him to get back in, with the car door open, I'm assuming. As the back of her car passed where John was standing, he realized she was serious about leaving, so he kicked her taillight on the far right side where the red plastic was, and then threw her glass from his left hand at the back of her car, causing the small dent above the left side of the taillight. So is she saying that John kicked and broke the taillight? So he kicked her taillight on the far right side where the plastic was. Okay. Let's look at this again. So Karen persisted in her refusal and began to slowly drive away with apparently the car door open, though, even though now Wendy's just left that part out, right? So a moment ago, the door was open because John was double-fisted and trying to get her to come out. Now Karen is pulling away and the car door is presumably still open. And now John is kicking the taillight. Now, I don't know if you have seen where this taillight is located on the Lexus, but it is not where my taillights are. Okay. The taillight on Karen's car is like, would have been like hip length to John, right? It's not where normal taillights sit on a car. It's, high up, right? It would have been probably even higher maybe than John's hip. So the taillight is high up. So now we have John, doing karate on the car? He's double fisted doing a karate kick at the right taillight. And then he takes her glass from his left hand and he throws it at the back of her car. Now, I will just say that as far as I can remember, and I'm not sure about this, but weren't the original glass pieces found under John? So why would they be, if somebody threw them at the car on the street, how would the glass have gotten to the other side of the car and then 20 feet forward and to the right? So, I mean, this doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. And if I hear one more time, I can barely take this, you guys. It's starting to get to me. Okay. Well, look at the next one, number 5. It took Karen Reed a moment, 60 feet of driving, to realize what John had done. She became enraged, even though these two fight all the time. And Karen has never resorted to violence. Never. There's no history of either of them becoming violent. But now on this night, of all nights, this night, that was it. She became enraged that he not only took her drink, but he also hit her car. So she floored it backwards, intending to scare. Oh, so it was an accident, I guess. She was intending to scare or punish, but not kill him. She wasn't trying to kill John. But this can't be what the Commonwealth is asserting, because they're trying to say that she did it on purpose, right? So, and John was bent over because his shoe fell off when he karate kicked, because it would have had to have been like he would have had to, in order for John to kick the taillight, it wouldn't have been a forward kick. He would have had to have literally, like you see, like in the Karate Kid, right? Like he would have had to like get up and kick, kick the side of the taillight. Okay. This is just totally absurd. Totally absurd. Now, let's also address the 60 feet nonsense. If I see this one more time, I swear to God, if the Commonwealth produces this nonsense again, this 60 feet, 24 miles per hour garbage came from Trooper Joseph Paul, okay? It came from Joseph Paul. Anything that comes from Joseph Paul should just be immediately nullified, because he's just too stupid to even be employed, like by anyone, let alone a police officer, okay? So we should just immediately be suspicious of the 60 feet. But in addition, when you do very simple math, okay? Very simple math. This is so obvious, it's not even worth discussing. I would love to hear how one of the naysayers, like Wendy here, how she's reasoning through. I mean, obviously, these people don't take the time to investigate the claims that they're making, because this 60 feet of driving is so ridiculous, okay? Like, Karen did not have possession of the car at this key cycle. The information that came from, what was it? It was like key cycle 1062, maybe. I'd have to go back and check. But whatever the key cycle was, that Trooper Joseph Paul, in his infinite wisdom, decided was the key moment where Karen hits John. That is the moment where the tow truck driver has possession of the car and gets stuck going in reverse to try to get Karen's car onto the tow truck, okay? So this did not happen. The 60 feet of driving did not happen. It's an absolute joke. It did not happen. Karen did not have possession of the car during that time. So anytime you see 24 miles per hour and 60 feet, you can just immediately just write it off because it did not happen. It did not happen. Okay. Did not happen. It didn't happen. Period. End of discussion. Okay. So we just have to accept that. That's just the reality of the situation. It didn't happen. So we already know that this version of events did not happen. Absolutely, absolutely. We also, and now I don't know, maybe John was a martial artist that I didn't hear that. Maybe he was, maybe he was a mixed martial arts guy. I don't know. I feel like I probably would have remembered that. But the idea that he would have, at his height, given where the taillight was on that vehicle, would have kicked that taillight, would have meant that he would have had to use his Karate Kid days skills, okay? He would have had to bust out his Ralph Macchio, like, best Karate Kid impression to kick the taillight that she's talking about. The right backside taillight, okay? Not to mention the fact that those taillights are not intended to break easily. So even if he had kicked it, it's very unlikely that it would have shattered. Okay? All right. So let's move on. It took Karen Reed a moment, 60 feet of driving, to realize what John had done. She became enraged that he not only took her drink, but also hit her car. So she floored it backwards, intending to scare and punish, not kill him. John was bent over, trying to get his shoe that fell off when he kicked her taillight, which, by the way, again, we would have been wearing. We're in the middle of the street now because apparently, he was hit in the street, obviously, right? So now John's shoe is in the middle of the street, and he's bending over to get the shoe. His back was to the house, right? Of course, because they have to figure out a way to make it so that his head, but not the rest of his body, gets hit. His back was to the house. He saw Karen Reed speeding towards him and put out his right hand. He put out the back of his right hand. Right. Of course. Because, oh my God. Did you see what it says there? He put out the back of his right hand because he was still holding his cocktail, which is why the back of his hand was badly bruised at the autopsy. Wow. So I'm about to get hit by a car, and rather than drop the drink that I have in my hand, I keep my hand, I hold on to my drink and then just throw the outside part of my hand at the car, because these are where his bruises were. They were here, right? Oh my God. Not to mention the fact that if he had put his hand up and the car was coming at him at 24 miles per hour, it would have been a lot more than just bruised, right? I mean, that hand would have been annihilated. It would have been crushed into, I don't know how many tiny little pieces of bone. I mean, this might be the most absurd. This is so absurd. I mean, she's got both Karen and John, like, they're raging alcoholics. They're raging alcoholics to the point where John is cajoling Karen to get out of the car with a drink because there's no alcohol inside the house, obviously. So, and John's house is 4 minutes away? There's no other way to get alcohol but for her to chase him. It's alcohol, dear. It's not heroin. It's not crack cocaine. It's alcohol. You absolute moron. Okay. All right. So then John is so committed to the drink that he's not, when he sees that the car is about to run him over, he doesn't drop his hands to protect himself. He hangs on tight to that drink. I mean, this is insane. It's really insane. The impact slammed John's hand with the glass still in it into his face. Wait a minute. So instead of dropping the cocktail glass, now they're saying that he was holding on to the glass as he raised it up to protect his face. So that what they're saying is he threw his hands out like this because he's clutching the glass. And then when the car hit him, the car hit the back of his hand, which smashed the glass onto his face. That's what they're saying. Wow. Okay. The already cracked taillight because of John's, best Ralph Macchio impression, scraped John's arm through his sweatshirt. Scraped. That's one way to say it. Yeah, scraped. I don't know. Mauled. How do you get those marks on John's arm from a scrape? From scraping the taillight. Oh my God. The already cracked taillight scraped John's arm through his sweatshirt as Karen Reed's car swiped him and spun him to the ground, where he slammed his head and passed out. But remember, he wasn't on the ground, right? He wasn't behind the car. Nobody found him in the street. He was found right by the flagpole, by the fire hydrant. So how did he get, Wendy, from behind the car, where you're saying that, she backed up for 60 feet, if he was low to the ground because he was bending over to get his shoe, how did he get from that position to where the fire hydrant is? So now she moved him too? She got out of the car and she moved him over? This is why there are two crime scenes. One where the taillight pieces were first broken because John kicked it. Right. Not because Michael Proctor put them there, but because John busted out the Karate Kid days to sidekick the taillight. Of course, that's what happened. One where the taillight pieces were first broken because John kicked it, and the other where more pieces broke off when she hit him. Right. Now, I don't know if you've thought about this, but again, this doesn't match up with the facts because of where Karen's taillight was located on the side of that car. So this idea that John was bending over to get a glass, to get a sneaker, to do anything such that he got a head wound from only the car hitting his head or the taillight making contact with the back of his head just doesn't hold. Not to mention that if the car was traveling for 60 feet at 24 miles per hour, like everybody is trying to say it was, and only his head was hit, it's very likely that his head and his skull would have been crushed. And that, of course, is not what has happened here. Now, the other problem that they have just right off the bat with this theory is where the taillight pieces were found. Now, remember, they're trying to say that there's little pieces of taillight all in John's shirt, but when you listen to Lieutenant O'Hara, who was in charge at the site of the CERT team search, when you listen to where he says the taillight pieces are, it is not where John was found, but on the street. So let's hear from him now. Now, this is a clip from the podcast 34 Fairview Road by William Phelps. If you are a true crime fan, you may know William Phelps. He's had some other popular podcasts, and he's pretty well known in the true crime scene. You can see from the beginning he makes out those who are supporters of Karen Reed, makes us all out to be loons. It's a giant conspiracy. It's completely unlikely. It's unreasonable. I've been doing this for years, and obviously it was a car accident, is his sort of take on the whole thing. That said, there are some interesting details that he uncovers just from, conversations that he's having with various people or people who are close to some of the direct players like Jennifer McCabe. Maybe it's worth listening to, maybe it's not. I don't know. I guess it depends on, how much information you need or want to have. But he takes excerpts from the trial, and this is one from Lieutenant O'Hara's testimony. So with that, let's hear from Lieutenant O'Hara about where the taillight pieces were found by the CERT team.
It's very difficult to definitively say we'd cleared the lawn properly. Normally on a search, if I'm the overall, as a team leader, I would run what you consider a command post or be the incident commander for CERT. I would stay behind the line and kind of document our efforts, but because this was such a small search area, it wasn't really an issue because we weren't breaking people off into teams. No one was out of my sight line, and we had multiple detectives on scene that were able to fill that role for me. I found multiple pieces of red and clear taillight. They were on the street in between the flagpole and the fire hydrant. There was 3 larger pieces, 2 red, 1 clear, and then a couple of smaller pieces. We found a sneaker. It was same location. Generally, it was in between the flagpole and the fire hydrant. The sneaker was flush up against the curb, and it was upside down. I think we had found 1 piece of taillight prior to the sneaker, and then after we found the sneaker, we found a few more additional pieces of taillight.
Now, one more thing we want to keep in mind here. Their directive from Lieutenant Tully from the MSP was to look for taillight and for the other shoe. And once they found those items, they packed up and left. So you kind of hear from O'Hara here that this wasn't how they would typically conduct a search. It was also very clear that they had already decided that Karen was guilty and they were looking for the evidence to support that theory, which is very different from going in not knowing what had happened and then just looking for evidence. And you can imagine that if you're on this team and your boss tells you, okay, look for taillight pieces and look for the other shoe, that's going to be different than just find evidence. Look everywhere, right? Something just to keep in mind, of course, like with everything else in this case. With that, let's get back to Wendy Murphy's theory. This is also why there were 2 different types of cocktail glasses at the scene. One was his, one was hers, even though the glass that was at the scene didn't match. The glasses did not match. Waterfall glass. So whatever glass is at the scene, God only knows where it came from. But one guess, just a guess, of course, would be that it came from a glass in the house. That's one potential possibility. Now, call me crazy because I don't know where I would get that idea, but it does appear that the glass at the scene did not come from the glass from the waterfall that we see John walking out with. So I don't know where Wendy's getting these glasses. Apparently, they just appeared out of nowhere, but again, if you know something different, let me know. My understanding is that that glass is not the same as the one that we see John leaving the bar with. Okay. This is also why there were 2 different types of cocktail glass at the scene. Okay. One was his, one was hers. Karen made a public statement declaring that she pulled a piece of glass from John's face when she found him because she was worried the prosecutor found her DNA on a shard of glass at the scene. All right. Wow, listen to this. This story is about an alcoholic, entitled, self-centered, wealthy white woman who was raised to believe she's better than the types of people who pay for their crimes. That is a great story. Wow. This story is about an alcoholic, entitled, self-centered, wealthy white woman who was raised to believe she's better than the types of people who pay for their crimes. Even though Karen also was the one who, she bailed Paul O'Keefe out of, he got into a car accident, day drinking, drunk. She went and bailed him out of jail, from what I understand, right? She's done everything she can, completely gave up her life to help John raise not even his children, but his sister's children for 2 years now. But she's just this alcoholic, entitled, self-centered, wealthy white lady who just happens to jump from one police officer to another, right? Because don't forget, she's with John, but then she's hitting on Brian Higgins, an ATF agent. If she's so entitled and she's so much better than everybody else, then what is she doing hanging out at the hillside in Canton? This is just so absurd, you guys. It's just, I feel bad even, I feel like I shouldn't even be marketing this because it's so ridiculous. But you be the judge. This is so extreme. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. You wonder, were they trying to make the story sound as ridiculous as they could? Like, what was the thinking with this nonsense? Who came up with this? Like, if we're going to invent stories for how John O'Keefe died, that would be a fun exercise. And we should maybe try that, because I bet we could all invent some pretty interesting ways to make the crime scene fit. But the thing is, it doesn't. I mean, that's why when the ARC guys were on the stand, they were talking about, shooting cannons of glasses out of cannons, because there was no way that the evidence on the scene matched what we were being told. There's no way that the evidence that what happened at that scene involved Karen's car backing into John at 24 miles per hour. That didn't happen. Nobody wants to blame the police. None of us want to point fingers at cops. That's not a fun thing to do. The only reason why that's even happening is because the first group of cops, with their leaf blowers and their keg cups, they didn't find Taillight. And they were there when there was far less snow. They would have seen 40 red taillight pieces. So the reason why the story of planting evidence, where that came from, that didn't just come out of thin air. That didn't just get invented like Wendy's story just got invented. Came from the fact that there was a group of cops doing a search at the scene and didn't see bright red taillight pieces anywhere. Okay? So the idea that, like, we're all delusional, you have to start to ask that question, right? Like, who's delusional again? How are you making sense of that? Oh, it was buried under the snow. Well, I don't know if you've seen the photos from that first search, but you see the ground. There's ground. I mean, it's so absurd. It's tough to take, right? Not to mention, I've already done the video where you've seen the different injuries and what it looks like when you get hit by a car, when it looks like when you get punched in the face, what it looks like when you get, attacked and murdered by a pack of dogs. And oh yeah, John's injuries align with that far more than they do with getting hit by a car. The absurdity, it's just so absurd. It's just so absurd. It never ends. It's like the never ending just absurdity, right? So you almost wonder, like, are they just trying to invent ways to make themselves sound more and more absurd? I don't know. And then there's one more thing that I wanted to show you. Let's hear, because we're already on the topic of anti-Karen Reed people, let's hear from the one who used to be a Karen Reed supporter. This is Kevin Lenahan. And I read his book, and I was going to do a lengthy video, kind of a book review, and I was going to share my thoughts. But by the end of it, it was so absurd that I came to the conclusion that he's just doing this for attention. He's just taking the opposite side because, there's plenty of people supporting Karen, and this makes him stand out. So it's like a way to get attention, I guess, or at least attract the people that are anti-Karen Reed supporters, because there's just less less people covering that side of the story. So I came to conclude that this can't possibly be what he really believes, because one of the trends in the book that is so obvious, anytime he can't explain something that would clearly make the cops or the Commonwealth or make Karen Read look innocent, he glosses over it and says things like, oh, just trust me. Like, oh, just trust me. The technical stuff with the house long to die in the cold, like, people much smarter than us figured it out. Just trust me. It's like, well, that's the problem to begin with. The problem is that you can't trust anything anybody says in this whole story. You have to test every aspect of it. And if you don't, then you're potentially missing a key piece of evidence. Just like if I take Trooper Paul's word for the key cycle nonsense, and I never even take one step past that, then I never realize how ridiculous it is to assert that Karen backed her car up 60 feet and hit him at 24 miles per hour. It didn't happen. It did not happen. That did not happen. If you can invent a different story about how Karen hit him, maybe that did happen. But that story, that key cycle, Karen didn't have the car. So it didn't happen. So it's impossible. So we can move away from this whole theory about her backing into John, because it did not happen. If you think that Karen killed him, she killed him some other way. That didn't happen. Okay, that didn't happen. It did not happen, did not happen, did not happen. This is ridiculous. It's so stupid to even keep talking about it. It like makes me physically ill because it didn't happen that way. Okay, so we can stop with that nonsense. Just stop. All right, let's hear what the big man now. Like I said, I read his book, and I'm not even going to do a rebuttal video because it's just ridiculous is really the point. It's ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Just totally, completely ridiculous. But this is a 2-minute video. I'm willing to give it 2 minutes because that's about what this book is worth. And I don't suggest, there's no reason to get it. If anything, it's just going to make you feel frustrated and for no reason. So let's take a listen to his little video, because like I said, I'm willing to give him 2 minutes. It's only 2 minutes.
So assuming O'Keefe did go inside the house and was beat up and bitten by a dog, now the killers have a problem. O'Keefe is dying. What are the options? What are the options? Forgetting about morality, but strictly from the scheming, self-interested side. Well, the best option is to call an ambulance and hope he lives. No murder charges if no one dies. All the witnesses are on your side, so whatever O'Keefe says when he wakes up, you could just get everybody to say that he started the fight. However, if you feel sure he's going to die, you might discuss ways to make it seem like he never entered the house. For example, say someone smashed him on the back of the head inside the house with a blunt object, and that's how he died. Might be hard to claim self-defense considering he was by himself and unarmed, and you had several cops on your side. So you decide to move the body out and say he never came into the house. But there's a problem. Reed is still sitting out there waiting. You're a cop, so you're well aware that cell phone pinging is used to track people. You've been a part of many investigations where that's used. You know the pinging does not determine a precise location or an exact time. It's approximate. But if you want to argue he never came inside the house, you better get that phone out. You can't bring O'Keefe out while Reed is sitting there in the car. So how can you make it seem like O'Keefe is outside, near Reed's SUV? Throw the phone into the yard near it. So at 12:29, you have McCabe call O'Keefe to find his phone. Whoever finds the phone accidentally accepts the call, then quickly hangs up. You take the phone and you quietly exit the house. Reed has her interior light on, as Ryan Nagel testifies, so you can see her quite well. She's sitting with her hands on the wheel, looking forward. She's parked on the edge of your property near the flagpole, facing away, so she won't see the door open. You sneak out and toss the phone into the yard near her SUV. This is at exactly 12:32, the last movement of that phone until after 6 a.m. Now you wait for her to leave. When she does, you carry O'Keefe out and drop him on his phone, which is how O'Keefe was found, lying on his phone in the snow on the lawn. You see, at this point, you're not thinking about framing Reed. Your plan is more simple. You'll say O'Keefe never came into the house, so whatever happened to him outside, you have no idea. You didn't see who attacked him. Will people suspect someone from the house did it? Yeah, of course they will. But they'll never be able to prove who did it, and that's enough. You have a lot of friends on the force, so they won't inspect the house. They can argue there was no probable cause since he never went inside.
Right.
It's not a great plan, but it's not easy to cover up an unplanned murder.
Right.
This isn't Professor Moriarty and Sherlock Holmes. Yesterday, the prosecution hinted at something similar as a way of suggesting that not everyone in the house was in on the conspiracy.
That's right.
They proposed that the killing was in the basement.
Yes.
And not everyone was down there.
That's right.
After the guests left at 1:30, the killers carried the body outside.
That's right.
The defense team didn't mention the phone, but that's the theory I've been working on for a few days, and it sounds similar to what they got going. I don't know. What do you guys think?
So, okay, let me give you some background on this guy. So that guy, Kevin Lenahan, he started out a Karen Reed supporter, and I guess he had a falling out with Turtle Boy. Now, I don't track this stuff closely, so I don't know exactly what happened. I'm not sure the details, but as far as I can tell, he had some kind of a falling out with Turtle Boy and then became a supporter of the Commonwealth and started to believe that Karen Reed was guilty. That's why I believe that maybe he just decided it was better for him in terms of like a marketing move, like a better play, with all of the attention and all the media focusing on the Karen Reed, free Karen Reed side. He figured he would stand out more if he was on the other side. I guess maybe there's some logic to that. I don't know. Maybe you get a lot of like angry hater attention. I don't know. I don't care. But I know that he did start out sort of on the side of Karen Reed. And you can see in that video there, that video was from, I think it was from 2023. So clearly he's no longer arguing that. But that is an interesting idea. The fact that, they threw somebody threw John's phone outside before Karen would have seen it or while Karen was sitting there. It's an interesting idea. Now, I think we figured out if Karen had attached to the Wi-Fi at 12:36. See, this is another problem for the Commonwealth. Originally, their timeline was built around Jen McCabe's eyewitness testimony, and she was obviously full of total nonsense, obviously, because she's telling them that Karen's out there at 12:45, but we already know that Karen was back at John's house. The Wi-Fi connected before she probably got there, so that was at 12:36, and then we know at 12:41 she's in the garage on the phone because we can hear her walking into the house, right? So we know she's there, let's say 12:37, and so she's probably already, or if not already, left the house by 12:32. She's just about leaving right at that time, because she would have had to have made it back to John's. And it's more than, I think it was a 6-minute drive, but, she's intoxicated. She didn't know where she was exactly. So we'll give her 10 minutes. And with that, it puts her, she would have had to have definitely left by 12:32. So she would have been gone. Karen would have already been gone. John's phone could have been thrown out the window. I mean, she wouldn't have seen it. At that point, she wouldn't have seen it. Nobody would have seen it. And that is the question. And he knows this. And in his book, I mean, it's interesting to hear him say that in that video then, because he knows that not everybody was in on a cover-up. And they weren't. I don't believe that Michael Proctor is trying to frame Karen Reed. I think he thinks she's guilty. But he just was concerned that there wasn't going to be enough evidence to convict her. So you can have the cops in a self-entitled, with self-righteous anger. They're acting from a place of, it's justified. She killed our brother in blue. Like, we're going to make her pay. Right? So from their view, she's guilty. this probably doesn't happen in front of everybody, because if it did, if something happens where somebody gets into a fight and John falls and hits his head, or even let's say somebody picks something, I don't know, a tire iron, and slams him in the back of the head because they're fighting, I don't think that even in that case, with all those people in the house and all these witnesses, they probably are going to call 911. Otherwise, how are you going to keep a secret like that? You cannot possibly be certain that your son's friends are going to keep their mouth shut. So there's no way that